coming up in all angles. Jamaicans unable to come home.
If there was a way for Thailand's borders to magically open and Jamaica's borders to magically open at the same time, then I would definitely take the chance.
Some in difficult circumstances.
Well, I feel really bad because I have high blood pressure. They set up my blood pressure to 189.
Has the government done the right thing? But first, St. Catherine under lockdown. Welcome to All Angles. I'm Dion Jackson-Milo and welcome to our viewers on onespotmedia.com. One of the government's measures to stop the spread of COVID-19 was to close our borders. Now, this has led to Jamaicans all over the world being unable to come home. We'll hear from some of them later on. We'll also talk to attorney Matanda Makulu. But first, Jamaica has now recorded 5 deaths and 125 cases of COVID-19. Last night, Prime Minister Andrew Holness announced a lockdown for the parish of St. Andrew. We'll be joined in just a few minutes by Zoom by Health Minister Dr. Chris Tufton. Just before that, though, reports of crowds at supermarkets and traffic snarls in St. Catherine earlier today. Producer Kelisha Williams has this report of her very long journey to work.
Right now it's almost 1 o'clock. I left home a little after 10 and I'm now at the Portmore Mall and it is still bumper to bumper traffic, and it seems like I'll be here for quite some time because traffic is not moving. And what motorists are doing, some persons are not going around the roundabout, they are stopping, they're turning back. I'm seeing a variety of persons on the road, the elderly, younger persons. It simply means people are simply not following the policy or the protocol set by the government. In all my years traveling to and from work, it's the worst I've seen the traffic. It will usually take me about 30 minutes to get to work from Greater Portmore, and I work at Lyndhurst Road. But no, it's taken me almost 3 hours. And mind you, I'm still in Portmore. Right now we're at the Portmore Mall. The only persons who seem to be moving right now are taxi drivers. They're adamant to get away from the gridlock by all means to get to the other side of the mall, so they're not using the roundabout, which is where the gridlock is right now at the Portmore Mall. Right now we're approaching what appears to be a checkpoint at the entrance of the Portmore Toll Road. I see a police vehicle, but still a gridlock, so close yet so far away. This is just a glimpse of the gridlock behind me, and the traffic is stretching all the way from Edgewater to the Portmore Mall. Since I'll be interacting with people, I have decided to put on my mask. I'm about to go through the security checkpoint, have my ID, and we're ready. There are like about 4 cars or so in front of us, so we're still waiting.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Let me see the ID, please, ma'am. What ID is that? Alright.
TVJ.
Oh, Miss Jackson.
No, Williams.
No, man.
Williams.
Yeah, Jackson.
Okay.
Temperature check. Temperature check and carry on. Let's watch this vehicle.
Okay.
Hope you for a temperature check.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon.
Come closer towards me. 37.1.
Okay, thank you.
37.5. We're free to go, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can turn to me now. So after about, what is that, 3 hours, 4 hours? It is 5 minutes to 2 and we are through. We're on the toll road, past the security checkpoint as you can see, and I'm on my way to work. Right now it's 10 minutes after 2, so after about 4 hours of being in traffic, I'm finally at work. I can tell you, being in the traffic for that long can be mentally and physically draining. Because right now, I'm having a pounding headache. So with your roving report, I'm Kelisha Williams.
Thank you so much, Kelisha. 4 hours to get from Portmore to Lyndhurst Road. Well, we are joined now by the Health Minister, Dr. Chris Tufton. Dr. Tufton, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Dion.
Kelisha's story there, I know, would have been echoed, or lots of people today would have had similar experiences. 4 hours just getting to Lyndhurst Road, much of that time actually spent in Portmore. Prime Minister Holness last night said he was receiving reports of panic at the supermarkets, and he said that was expected. Today, massive crowds, and as we heard there in that report, horrendous traffic. Wasn't this entirely predictable, though, given the strictures that the government put in place?
Well, it's you expect some of that. There's no doubt about it. This is an unusual occurrence for a good reason, and it does create some inconveniences, and there are citizens who are going to respond to the news in anticipation of those inconveniences, further adding to the inconvenience on the road or at the supermarkets and so on. It has to be balanced though against the reason for the suddenness of the announcement, because the objective of the announcement is to containment of the potential spread of a virus, and so you want persons to stay put. An announcement with notice gives persons an opportunity to move, and the reality is that's not what you want to happen, because you're trying to deal with a public health threat. So it's a matter of almost trying to avoid the worst of the two challenges, if you will, or two evils. But having said that, we are learning as we go along. So to the extent that we have had some issues today, the authorities are working together, the constabulary, the JDF, and others, to ensure that we can smooth out some of those kinks.
Except with respect, though, Dr. Tufton, you're putting a lot of it there on the citizens, when a lot of that would seem to be due to the measures that were put in place. For instance, that has led to the very problems you're seeking to avoid. So you're seeking to avoid community gatherings, large crowds. The police told me today that at one supermarket, about 800 people gathered. Police had to be called into 4 or 5 supermarkets in the parish because of the crowds that converged. Let me give you an example. In Grand Cayman, for instance, they have about a population of about 50,000 people. They're on lockdown. What they do is have people with surnames A to K can go to do their shopping on Mondays, on Wednesdays, on Fridays for the entire day. People L to Z can go on Tuesdays, on Thursdays, and Saturdays for the entire day. In Greater Portmore alone, which has a population of 3 to 4 times that of Grand Cayman, you've given people about 3 hours, 2 days a week to do that shopping. Again, isn't it predictable that we would have these problems, and isn't it as a result of the poor decisions that the government made in implementing this?
First of all, you omitted to mention that the hours were allocated and alphabetical surnames also. So it was not everybody should go at the same period that was allowed, because we did split the alphabet in 2 and say persons with a certain surname should go at a particular time. In addition to that, of course, the other variables around Portmore is that Portmore has far more outlets for shopping than, let's say, a Grand Cayman. Having said that, it was expected that you would have persons rushing to get their supplies, and what we were hoping is that persons would abide strictly by what was announced. Given that we have some issues, we will have to make some provisions to correct. And I know the constabulary, the Minister of National Security, and others who are part of this process will examine and review, and will try to make it better as the days progress.
You're correct. I hadn't referenced the fact that in Jamaica you were going as well according to surnames, but that was actually what I was alluding to in making the Grand Cayman comparison, that the surnames there, they've given them 3 full days for the week, whereas we have given people A to M, I think it is, about 3 hours in the day. So again, pointing to the significant compression of time which people have in which to shop, which naturally leads to a concentration of people and more people being out at during that time. I understand the Prime Minister a short while ago in Parliament has announced that the hours will be extended, but be extended till 8 o'clock, and it's still the 2 days a week. Isn't that just a very tiny, tiny improvement on the situation today?
As I said, we had taken note of the rush and had discussed the review. The Prime Minister has announced an adjustment. Let's see what happens. I think the knowledge of the scenario and how and the length of time of the restrictions is would have seeped into the population. Persons would have made appropriate provisions. I'm sure the rush on shopping today would have made provisions for a fair amount of time to allow for some additional flexibility. So I think it will get better. That's my view anyway, that it will get better. But we'll watch it and see. And if there needs to be further adjustment, I'm sure the Prime Minister will make that call based on the advice he gets.
All right, just before I leave this though, just to point out that you said in terms of people getting their supplies, we spoke to 2 people today who gave up because of the crowds. So they would then be home Thursday, Friday, not being able to go to the shop and be in an even more needy situation on Saturday. But also spoke to William Mafood, who said he has suggested at least 4 to 5 days of shopping, again for more hours. But your position is that we're going to wait to see what happens on Saturday and then see what happens after that?
Yeah, it's not just a matter of wait. I mean, we've responded to and have adjusted the time.
By a minuscule amount though, Dr. Tufton. A 3-hour adjustment with all those people. That's 800, remember what I said, 800 people turned up at one supermarket today.
Yes.
So it's a fair assumption that 99% of them didn't get through.
I would not conclude on that unless I have some evidence.
90%.
Let's see what happens. I think it's the key to all of this is that citizens have to recognize why we're doing what we're doing, why it is important for them to stay put, why it is important to practice social distancing, even if they have to go to the supermarket, wearing a mask, being patient. All of that is very important because it's about the public health interest, the public health concern that we need to address. Otherwise, we're all at risk. And that's hopefully that message is not lost in the need to wait to access food supplies.
Well, it very likely will be lost if you turn up and say 500 or 800 people in front of your supermarket. With the best will in the world, you're either going home or you're not social distancing.
Right. Now remember, we had also indicated that what should happen is that one person per family should go shopping. And I'm hoping that that message gets through too. I mean, you have cases where multiple members of a family, because shopping is an experience. Part of the challenge with the messaging and the absorption of the messaging around this issue is that it is unusual. It's unusual to our culture and our practices. So we have to keep repeating it. So there is going to be a communications program that accompanies the what we would like persons to do and try to justify it on the grounds, of course, of the public health interest. So we appreciate your discussing it, and hopefully persons will see the wisdom of what we have announced.
All right, going to ask you to hold on for just a moment. Just have a few more questions for you. We're talking to Health Minister Dr. Chris Tufton. You're watching All Angles. We're back in a moment. Chris. Thank you so much for staying with us. All Angles continues. Just a reminder, this is a special extended edition. We're going on till 10. We have the Health Minister, Dr. Chris Tufton, with us. He remains with us for this segment. After that, we're going to be talking to some Jamaicans who are overseas, who want to come home, who can't. So you need to watch out for those interviews. They're coming up really interesting as well. Dr. Tufton, thank you so much for staying with us. Prime Minister announcing as well in Parliament a short while ago that all call centres in St. Catherine are going to be closed. No, this follows what? 20 positive tests today, 30 yesterday in terms of the particular call centre that has been the focus of attention. Isn't this a classic case of closing the gate after the horse run gone long time, Dr. Tufton?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's an indication of a responsive government
Or
to an
reactive?
ongoing
Or
public health.
reactive?
No, well, the response can have some reactive nature to it, and that's not a problem once we don't ignore the problem. The reality is that 40,000 persons are hired in call centers across the country. 10,000 or so of those work from home. Many provide essential services, not to mention the pay that they get for work. And the overwhelming majority of them, up to this point anyway, are abiding by the protocols that are in respect to this issue that we have. This particular one has not, or did not, even though they were inspected and were given some recommendations. And we will take strong measures against them because they are, having been in breach, they have created an unfortunate situation as it relates to the risk that we face. But the rest of them are complying, and I got a report up to today based on inspections that have been done, many of them in Montego Bay, as you know, in St. James, and they are observing the measures. We're hoping that coming out of this, we will reinforce some of those measures and enhance them, and we have had some discussions with them. So it really is how you balance the need to preserve economic activity, particularly among that segment of the population, and at the same time, manage the public health risk that is there. And to date, I think, as it relates to call centers, we have done well. This is very unfortunate, and we have to take whatever action is necessary to prevent it happening again.
Here's the thing, because that balance that you speak of, I think most people understand at least the intent behind it, trying to balance the economic activity with preventing the spread of COVID. The problem in the case of the call centers is that, as I said at the press briefing yesterday, there's been concern about them from day one in terms of the conditions of work, the proximity of the workers to each other, the closeness, the tightness in those areas. So having made the decision that this was to be designated an essential service that exempted, that these workers were to be allowed to be continuing in the national interest, in the for economic reasons, why was there not a much stronger emphasis on regulatory actions, passing orders or regulations specific to the industry as opposed to relying on voluntary protocols and ensuring stringent public health checks? Because workers said, what did I go on a joke business that they were saying for weeks that the protocols weren't being adhered to. So wasn't this a massive failure on the government's part?
Well, there's no doubt that the breaches, as manifested in the case of this call center, has created a significant public health challenge for us and the population. Hence the shutting down of St. Catherine and all the other challenges that you mentioned earlier. Having said that, we had a system of audit. We did inspections across the board. We continue to do inspections. And, again, I say for the most part, there is compliance. The penalties of breaching the rules are strong and have been made stronger, as announced by the Prime Minister. And what is needed now is investigation. So we're hoping that the penalties will be sufficient to be a deterrent, but also the call centers should also operate in a manner that protects their interests and the interests of their employees, and that should act as a motivator also. And I think for the most part it is. But you always have deviance, and we need to be more. I'd accept that we probably will need to step up our enforcement through unannounced audits and so on in order to ensure that this doesn't reoccur.
But this seems to be precisely the problem, that the administration was hearing that the call centers are being compliant, that the protocols are being observed. And if you listen, as I go back to, if you listen to the workers, you are hearing a different story. They were speaking of situations where protocols were implemented initially and then abandoned. So is it that, as Jamaicans said, them did a whole of you, Dr. Tufton?
Well, I mean, I've gotten anecdotal, messages from workers at one point or another. And when I get those, I would refer them to the regional health authority follow-up checks to be done. And in many cases, those checks have been done. Again, I say the report that I have seen today indicates that of the dozens of call centers throughout the country that have been inspected, for the most part, they have observed the protocols that have been established. The call center business is a very challenging one in many respects. I mean, it does involve a lot of persons. The structure of the call centers do pose some risks in terms of social distancing if there isn't an adjustment. And part of the new protocol was to have had those adjustments done. In other words, people sitting with a space between each seat and not congregating beyond a certain number, whether it's in the lunchroom or otherwise, the hand sanitizers, the masks wearing and so on. So for the most part, that has been followed. We're going to have to step up the enforcement to ensure that we reinforce the need for that to continue to take place.
The whole idea of the shutdown of St. Catherine in and of itself is seen by some as half measures. One of the concerns about partial shutdowns is, for instance, what we saw in Italy. They shut down one section of the country, people fled to the other section of the country, and then you had the complete unbridled spread of the disease and the catastrophe we saw there. Are you concerned that this partial shutdown, St. Catherine alone, is in fact too little too late?
Well, I wouldn't say it's too little too late, but I would accept that it is not a risk-free act. There's another feature of the society that needs to factor into the shutting down. While I think the government is very willing to do a complete shutdown in the public health interest, we also have to be sensitive to the fact that we have a society where a fairly large segment of the population has a very short earning cycle, and that short earning cycle could mean significant suffering if you were to disrupt that for a prolonged period of time. In other words, people earn literally daily in order to eat daily. And so it is a difficult mix, but necessary to at least attempt to use public education, moral suasion, the law, to create partial restrictions or quarantine areas, which is what we did in Bull Bay, what we did in Corn Peace, and what we're now doing in St. Catherine, while still maintaining some semblance of economic activity because of the nature of our country and the economy, that the socioeconomic profile of the society. But the truth is, having tried that, and if it doesn't work, because there's always the risk of movement, and we may have to elevate that to a more aggressive stance, and I don't think we're afraid to do that.
Give a prips now, Dr. Tufton. What happened? National lockdown by weekend?
No, for the St. Catherine scenario, bear in mind a couple of things. When it was announced at about 7 or 7:30 last evening, there was a curfew due at 9, and then the official shutdown was for 5 a.m. So technically speaking, it was an announcement with a 1.5 hour gap between the curfew and shutdown and the announcement. And it was deliberate. We didn't really give a lot of persons time to move from one part of the city to another, or one parish to another, even though there is anecdotal evidence that some of that may have taken place. So the potential for drift or for movement was factored in the announcement and the time period for announcement. But as I said, if we need to elevate that, I'm sure the Prime Minister and the Cabinet will take that decision in the interest of the country.
How worried are you right now? I mean, drop your mask for a moment. How worried are you that this could get much worse?
I am concerned as Minister of Health and Wellness. We have always felt, and I operate with a team, obviously, and they are a good team, the clinical team. The idea was to keep a managed approach to the virus, even though we always knew that the virus would come, it would spread, and we had to, but we were managing it in a way that would not see a spike in a short period of time, because we needed to have the facilities to deal with it.
So now we've seen the spike. How worried are you?
I'm concerned, but clearly planning to deal with it. But that we could have up to 1,000 persons out there who potentially could have the virus and carrying it means a lot of work. And team is in the field, but it could represent the start of community spread. And that
You don't think community spread has started?
No, this is more a cluster. It's a large cluster, but it's a cluster. The virus spread because of an individual that brought it into a surrounding where persons then picked it up from that individual. That is clustering according to WHO. The community spread is where it starts turning up and you're not sure where it came from, which is very likely now, given that so many persons could potentially be exposed, given the positive tests that we have seen.
All right, I'm just about out of time. Just before I let you go, how are you and the CMO holding up?
We're holding up. We're the CMO, PS, the team. I am the face to some extent and herself of the task, but there are literally thousands of others of us out there. The people in the field doing contact tracing are just amazing, and they are working around the clock. But I think we recognize the importance of this mission. It's a 1 in a 100-year mission. I think we are here for a reason, and we're working on it. And if we have to do without a few extra hours of sleep, we will do so. We just want the country to cooperate with us and the government to get over this, and we will get over it.
Gonna have to leave it there. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot. All the best.
Health Minister Dr. Chris Tufton. Stay tuned. When we come back after the break, we're going to be talking to Jamaicans in Thailand, in Barbados, and a Jamaican who is stranded on a ship, all of them wanting to come home. So stay with us.